I am here at the panel, joined representatives of the Evaluation Office of UNICEF, UNFPA, UN Women, and UNCDF, but we have a large constituents joining us online. Welcome to this very first debriefing meeting to member states on the SDG Synthesis Coalition. We are really delighted to have you around this table gathering for this first briefing. As you know, evaluation asks with a critical thinking hard questions about the performance of our organizations in support to the mandate of the UN in different agencies and in support to development. We are all committed to the Sustainable Development Goals and its achievements, and we are concerned that the current crisis that the world is going through may provoke some setback achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Therefore, we think it's of absolute importance to accelerate progress towards the of the SDGs. And the evaluation community gathered around the United Nations and beyond is really committed to support the efforts of states to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. In this regard, what you are listening today is really a commitment from evaluation offices within the UN system and beyond. Beyond, because there are also various multilateral organizations as well as bilateral organizations that are concerned with the way in which we can make more progress. When we conduct evaluations, we ask questions about the relevance, the effectiveness, the efficiency of the use of the resource, the sustainability of results, and we present the evidence that we gather in a very succinct and understandable manner in our evaluation reports. Since 2015, thousands of evaluation reports have been produced throughout the globe on the achievement of the SDGs. Therefore, we think it's important to gather all that evidence and try to make sense of the dispersed evaluative evidence out there in a way that is understandable, in a way that is easy to communicate, and in a way that leads to action. We think it's extremely important to accelerate progress towards the Sustainable Development Goals. And we also think that we need to understand what needs to be accelerated. What is working? What is not working? And most importantly, a question that we as evaluators usually ask is why things are working. Try to identify the explanatory factors behind progress made or progress hindered. We think that by identifying these factors, we would be able to provide member states with clear evidence about what can be accelerated for the achievement of the SDGs before 2030. In that sense, what you will hear today is really a proposal for a global evaluative evidence synthesis coalition that aims to contribute to this debate with the conduct of 5 syntheses on the 5 pillars of the Sustainable Development Goals, namely the pillars of people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. These are a way of summarizing the wealth and complexity of the SDG framework. I am joined here today by a few of the evaluation offices that are supporting this initiative, although the idea is really picking up momentum. So far, we have 37 UN entities behind the initiative, but I'm very proud and glad to welcome my colleagues from the agencies that are based in New York. And I will introduce my colleagues. First, Carrie Albright from UNICEF. She's the Deputy Director of the Evaluation Office at UNICEF. Carrie, welcome.
Thank you, Oscar, and welcome everyone. first of all, I just wanted to say briefly, give credit to UNDP for what a fantastic idea this really was, and why we're so excited to actually come on board. As Oscar already said, I think that this stage in the SDGs, there's a realization that we really need to do something different to get back on track. I think there's also, from our side, a recognition that we need to be able to much better see the whole picture, and to see the whole in a way that single studies really can't. Not just looking at what works where and why, but what doesn't, to avoid reinventing the wheels and making mistakes again and again. I think another really great thing about this initiative potentially is that we can also identify gaps. So really being to look and see, what do we still not know at this stage that can help set research agendas, it can help set evaluation agendas for the future. But that's another side that I think is really important. And then finally, I think another thing that we really were excited about here was that it's a global public goods effort. This isn't something that's going to be squirreled away on a shelf. It's actually out there to really help inform member states and colleagues around the world around what could be a potentially, what do we need to trade in a post-SDG framework. And I think for all of those three reasons, identifying what works, identifying where we still don't know what works, and opening up as a initiative to be able to think about the future and where we need to concentrate is why we're so delighted to be on board. So thank you for inviting us to be a partner.
Thank you very much, Kerry. Delighted to have you on board. Let me now pass the floor to Deborah McQueenie from UNFPA.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I would echo and agree with everything that Kerry just said. UNFPA's Evaluation Office is very pleased to be an active participant in the Global Synthesis Coalition, given the commitment to evidence-based decision-making and interagency collaboration. These two aspects are actually at the heart of the UNFPA strategic plan, ensuring that there's a quality of data to ensure that evidence-based or evidence-informed actions are taken across three transformative results, which relate to reducing the unmet need for family planning, reducing preventable maternal deaths, and reducing gender-based violence. The UNFPA strategic plan also recognizes that the collective UN system can open doors for accelerating these three transformative results, and that multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder partnerships and ecosystems, including with private entities, are vital to address common challenges. And UNFPA is committed to the UN reform efforts in this regard. UNFPA's evaluation recognizes that the use of evaluation is a high priority to unleash the transformative power of evaluation. Syntheses allow us to shift the lens across bodies of evaluatives to extract new evidence and insights in powerful ways. So this multi-stakeholder initiative is ambitious, but critical in providing rigorous funds to further accelerate efforts to achieve the SDGs by 2030. UNFPA is prepared to be an active and committed member, and thanks UNDP for their leadership in this coalition. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deborah. Let me now pass the floor to Inga Schniewakaite from UN Women.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and good evening, and good morning, and good evening to everyone. So UN Women is part of the coalitions mainly because of three key reasons. So first, it is learning, and that echoes very much with the sentiments expressed by other colleagues. And learning about what works, what doesn't work, but also particularly in the area of gender equality and rights. So given the centrality of gender equality to all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Second reason is efficiency gain. So it's working jointly with other UN agencies and other partners and really learning from joint wisdom, knowledge, experience, and also pulling resources together. And the third reason is finally contributing to this very unique and project that has a transformative potential by raising awareness of barriers and also opportunities for the implementation of the SDGs. And why this initiative is important. Again, I'm going to speak from the perspective of mandate of UN Women, but also the perspective of all United Nations in terms of the importance of gender equality. So the latest available Sustainable Development Goal data on goal 5 shows that the world is not on track to achieve gender equality by 2030. So it will be another 286 years to close the global gender gap. So this underscores the imperative of bold policy action and ambitious finance. So therefore, it is critical for us to have a very clear picture of policies on SDGs that work, including gendered impacts of those policies. So Young Women is very excited to be part of this coalition and also to bring active gender equality perspective to this work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inga, for those words. And now pass the floor to Christian from the United Nations Capital Development Fund.
Thank you, Oscar. Dear colleagues, thank you very much for the opportunity to say a few words. On behalf of UNCDF, I would like to thank DAIO for this excellent initiative and under the leadership of Director Garcia. I also would like to thank the member states, their support and interest in this important initiative. As it was said, there's a large amount of evaluation reports available, and I think there's an opportunity to aggregate that information and have a clear overview of where we stand currently and how to better inform and better work going forward. UNCDF, at its core mandate, has the SDG 15, which is one of the partnership pillars, and it's one of the areas where knowledge base is relatively limited, and so we are very much looking forward to be able to contribute to expanding that knowledge base, considering that we have the work, and we are very excited to be able to provide the second life, so to speak, to our evaluation reports, and that they can contribute to that greater good. I'm very much looking forward on the personal note to work with your team. And I'm happy on behalf of UNCDF to support this exercise going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Christophe. And I want to thank my fellow coalition representatives from UN Evaluation Aid and evaluation offices. Also joining us today from the secretariat of this coalition, we have Ana Rosa Suarez, who is UNDP Chief Evaluation Synthesis and Lessons, who will talk us through the presentation of the SDG synthesis. We are also joined by Thomas de Hoop, synthesis team leader from the American Institute of Research, leading the first evidence synthesis for the partnership pillar that will briefly present the methodology for our first synthesis under development. So in order to allow space for your questions, just let me rate that this coalition is built on the spirit of co-creation. So you are invited to participate in this coalition with your inputs, with your efforts, in order to shape it and leave it to good grounds in terms of providing the evaluative evidence to inform the intergovernmental deliberations for the acceleration of the sustainable development goals. So without much further ado, let me pass the floor to Ana Rosa to make a brief presentation about the scope of the coalition.
Thank you, Oscar. Morning, distinguished delegates and partners. My name is Ana Soares. As Oscar mentioned, I'm the Chief of Evaluation Synthesis and Lessons at UNDP Independent Evaluation Office. But today I'm wearing my second hat as member of the Secretariat of the SDG Synthesis Coalition. It is my honor to speak to you today on behalf of the partners. That is 37 entities and a growing number of bilateral and multilateral organizations and evaluation networks. In this presentation, I'll give you a brief overview of the global SDG Synthesis Coalition, covering its purpose, objective, progress to date, next steps, and expectations. I will introduce the ways in which the coalition's work will support progress towards the achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals, and what joining the coalition would entail for you, member states, in terms of what we are offering, what we are asking of you. Finally, I will present practical ways in which you can get involved. As Oscar mentioned, the synthesis based on evaluative evidence of all countries will be framed down the 5 pillars of the SDGs: partnership, peace, prosperity, people, and planet. Now is the time. We need all hands on deck to get back on track and accelerate results towards the achievement of the SDGs. The evaluation community has an important role to play in these efforts. The role the coalition will play is in synthesizing the rich amount of evaluative evidence that already exists out there, which can inform broader efforts to accelerate progress towards the goals. The evidence synthesis planned by the coalition will provide robust evidence of what has worked, what has not worked, and why, and in different contexts. The synthesis will highlight key insights on barriers and enablers linked to the achievements or lack of it, and it will generate lessons and recommendations for how to accelerate progress towards the 2030. So why do we need synthesis on the SDGs? What added value do they offer? There is a vast quantity of evaluative evidence, progress towards, and challenges faced in achieving the SDGs. Collectively, the UN evaluation offices have developed a wealth of evidence. Annually, hundreds of evaluations are produced by the UN, and many others by national governments, bilateral and bilateral organizations, as well as academic institutions. There is much evidence. In fact, there is so much evidence that it's difficult to credibly identify what is working, what is not, what successes should be replicated, what should be avoided, and what is going to make the most difference to accelerate towards the SDGs. We heard you, distinguished member states, distinguished delegates. We heard you very loud and clear in our board interactions and in the QCPR, urging us, UN entities, to work jointly more often, more coherently. In the spirit of the UN reform, this is a response to your request. We will jointly generate this SDG synthesis with lessons harnessed in a credible and methodologically rigorous way that member states can trust and timely use it to accelerate the achievement of the goals. There has been great interest in together in contributing to the synthesis. As I mentioned, we have 37 UN entities committed, but the ones named in this slide are only the ones that have already identified the pillars to which they specifically want to contribute. They also have countries that indicated interest and are defining their ways of engaging with the coalition and which they're most interested, such as Barbados, Belgium, Canada, Denmark, Finland, Ireland, Norway, Spain, Iceland, USA, and others. We hope that over the next few days, more UN entities and member states join this collective effort and add their names and support to the coalition of the willing. Governance structure is being organized for the coalition. The slide that the governance structure, the slide illustrates that the governance structure consists of a secretariat to coordinate partners, meetings, events, and manage the recruitment of the teams, financial and administrative matters. This is currently being led by UNDP, Evaluation Office. Then we have a steering committee that will be composed of high-level government officials and the heads of evaluation networks to give the right prominence to the initiative. This committee will steer the coalition, validate key learning needs for the synthesis, help the coalition raise the necessary funds and in-kind support for the synthesis, and secure broad member states participation, highlighting the utility and learning aspect of this effort to promote the uptake of the recommendations once they're available. There will also be a technical advisory panel for each of the syntheses. The panels will be composed of diverse experts from around the world, the North, but also the Global South. They will quality assure the synthesis, ensuring its relevance, conceptual clarity, and accuracy of the synthesis results, especially the recommendations. And lastly, there will be a management group for each synthesis. These groups will be composed of the most committed partners in each pillar to manage the exercise and help mobilize the human and financial resources needed. Members of the management group will also help to identify experts for the technical advisory panels and provide support to the synthesis teams to access data and evidence to ensure timely delivery of the synthesis. We present an ambitious timeline to carry out and disseminate all 5 pillar syntheses by 2025. It is intentionally ambitious. That is to allow countries at least 5 years to implement the recommendations before 2030. As you can see, the preliminary results of the first synthesis, which will be of the partnership pillar, will be presented at the high-level political forum July of this year, and the final results and recommendations by the time of the SDG summit in September. The synthesis of the pillars, people, planet, peace, and prosperity, will also start soon, as is shown in the timeline. With the adequate resources, we expect to be able to present the results of these other 4 syntheses in the 2024 HLPF, leaving the rest of the year and 2025 to disseminate the results of the work on ensuring the uptake of the recommendations for accelerate progress towards the achievement of the SDGs in 2030. In terms of progress, the first synthesis on partnership pillar is already underway. The American Institutes for Research, AIR, was commissioned to conduct work. Thomas de Hoop, the AIR team leader here today, will briefly present the methodology and scoping under construction, under development. As previously mentioned, we also advanced with the coalition secretariat. We have a synthesis methodologist on board, a partnership building and resource mobilization coordinator, and other support staff to help with the work. With the help of UNDP Bureau for External Relations and Advocacy, a partnership engagement plan is being developed to crowd in partners to co-create this initiative, to entice member states and partners to mobilize resources, share evaluative evidence and data, and to take part in the governance structure of the coalition. As partners, we offer you visibility and access to valuable and reliable evidence of what works, why, how, and in what contexts, in the form of timely synthesized lessons and recommendations for decision makers to use it in accelerating their goals for countries. What are we asking? We need access to your data and evidence from your evaluation reports. Not all countries have their evaluation reports organized, open, and centralized database. So this is no small task. But we'll need your help to access not only statistical data not as complicated with the help of our UN stats colleagues. But we also need access to the credible evidence from evaluations generate your countries and about your country's development efforts and progress. For DAC countries, reports can be uploaded via the Eval database, Derek. Other countries are asked to send their reports by direct email to our secretariat address. If a country would like to be part of the governance structure, you may do so by putting forward a name of a high-level political to take part in the steering committee, or suggesting names of subject matter experts to be considered for the advisory panel, each of the syntheses. Of course, we also need adequate resources to timely deliver important synthesis to help accelerate the SDGs. Therefore, we encourage financial contributions to commission the credible systems for the 4 remaining pillars. The first one is already fully funded. Some UN entities, including UNDP, have allocated modest amounts from their evaluation offices, together with a few other donors, to fund the first pillar. But as a public good, as mentioned by Carrie, to generate the 5 syntheses, there are not UN entities, but an exercise from a global coalition of 37 UN entities and multiple non-UN entities. The bulk of the financial resources for this will need to come from extra budgetary resources rather than core resources of individual UN entities. Therefore, I urge member states and partners to help us mobilize the necessary funds to accomplish the synthesis effort. We welcome second staff time as well. UNV, JPOs, or any other professional staff level to help manage the coalition funding efforts, conduct the synthesis, and support with the dissemination efforts for the uptake of the recommendations to be generated from the synthesis. Last but not least, we count on your support to promote the results of the synthesis when they become available, to ensure the timely uptake of the recommendations generated. That means helping the synthesis to timely access the right fora of decision makers, such as the SDG Summit, for consideration of the lessons and recommendations that will be generated. In addition to promote the results of the synthesis and the uptake of the recommendations, we are developing an SDG evaluative evidence platform. This is where you will find the reports, data, and other information products and functionalities. As we progress with the synthesis and upgrade our machine learning and artificial intelligence capabilities to synthesize the multitude of evidence will be collected, this platform will offer increasing functionality. We will incorporate open access to UNDP's Artificial Intelligence for Development Analytics tools, also known as AIDA, to support and facilitate efforts by partners and coalition members to generate their own synthesis in various formats to meet different needs. In terms of financial resources required, through pledges received to date, we have mobilized nearly $750,000 for all 5 pillar syntheses. This has allowed us to fully fund the partnership pillar synthesis, and some resources are already specifically marked for other pillars, but the amount is still insufficient to start the other synthesis. We need your support. You can see our initial estimate and current ask is for 3.5 million for the 5 pillar synthesis, but considering that just the first pillar is costing nearly $500,000, we may need more resources or in-kind contributions on all 5 syntheses. We hope to count on your support to fill the gap. The Secretariat of the Coalition is holding bilateral conversations with member states and other partners, soon possibly with the private sector and foundations as well, to pursue the target budget. We welcome your guidance and support in fundraising efforts, pointing us to potential donors. And we thank everyone who has contributed resources of any kind to date. Thank you for your attention. I'm now going to call our team leader, Thomas de Hoop, to give us a brief presentation of the methodology and scoping approach we're working together for the first pillar, partnership synthesis. Thank you.
Probably need a clicker from someone. Thanks all. It's really a pleasure to be here. And thanks so much, Anna, Oscar, everybody else for the introduction. My name is Thomas de Hoop. I'm managing economist at the American Institutes for Research and the team leader of the SDG Partnership Pillar Synthesis. I'm here with my colleague, Andy Coombs, who's Senior Qualitative Evidence Synthesis Specialist, also from American Institutes for Research. We have a much larger team, but we are representatives of our team here during this meeting. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. And like in a sense, I essentially to just invite all of you to see this evidence synthesis in the spirit of SDG 17, which is really about partnerships. And like we are seeking for partnerships in that respect from all of you. I'm going to speak about a number of things during this brief presentation. I first want to give you a brief introduction to American Institutes for Research. You may all wonder why American Institutes for Research is conducting this evidence.
I'm not able to hear anything.
Choices we have made for the methodology. As Anna mentioned, like we're working on an ambitious timeline, and we also want to be realistic in that respect, and we've already had to make some choices in that respect for our scope around the evidence synthesis. To start, I want to give a brief introduction to American Institutes for Research. Both Annie as well as myself, we're part of the International Development Division of American Institutes for Research. American Institutes for Research is a really large research organization, about 1,600 staff, with headquarters in the United States, in Arlington, close to Washington, D.C. But in addition to that, we also have offices in Kenya, in Ethiopia, in Mexico, and in Bosnia. And in general, we do a lot of international work, conducted research and evaluation work in over 90 countries in the last 5 years. And we're working a lot with agencies. We have conducted over 20 impact evaluations for UN organizations. Those are just impact evaluations. If we talk about other evaluations, we probably have conducted more than 40 evaluations for UN organizations. And in the evidence synthesis space, we're also like we're considered like recognized experts in that space as well. Especially in the international development space, we've conducted evidence synthesis for UNICEF, for UID, for the World Bank, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Just like recently, for example, we finished evidence synthesis for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on equality, as well as for the World Bank on forced displacement and education. And like on top of that, we also have a center that specifically focuses actually on evidence synthesis. It's called the Methods of Synthesis and Integration Center. And as part of that, but also as part of previous work, we have also developed synthesis methods that are very well aligned with UN evaluations in particular. We recognize the importance within UN evaluations of the OECD DAC criteria. And like our evidence synthesis methods are specifically with those. And we have developed refined and validated tools also to appraise the quality of impact, performance, and process evaluation, recognizing that all of those different evaluations bring different types of lessons on SDG 17. So just to give you a little bit of background about like why evidence synthesis is such a powerful tool. And essentially, like one key reason is that it captures and consolidates evidence that is voluminous, diverse, and fragmented across disciplines. We don't only look at one single discipline. We don't only look at one single study. We critically appraise the quality of the evidence from both impact, performance, and process evaluation. So we make sure that when we synthesize evidence, that it's based on high quality evidence, using transparent methods to give the best possible general statements. And when I mean generalized statements, that could either mean that an intervention is effective across the world or across a certain region. It could also mean that an intervention, like the effectiveness of that intervention, is very context specific. Those are exactly the kind of questions that you can ask with evidence synthesis. When we look specifically at SDG 17, essentially, like the partnership pillar is comprised of 5 components. It includes finance, technology, trade, capacity building, and systemic issues. We need to prioritize as part of our evidence synthesis 3 of those 5 components. I will come back to that later, but that's to meet our ambitious line, to be ready with preliminary lessons learned for the high-level political forum on sustainable development. And all of those 5 components together essentially bring together governments, the private sector, and civil society to partner with each other. When we think about it, essentially those 5 components come together in partnerships between those 3 types of actors. And those partners together with the 5 components can lead to various outcomes. In finance, for example, that can lead to government revenue or foreign direct investments. In the technology space, that can lead to internet access, to clean energy. Those are just examples. In trade, it can lead to increased export volumes or like lower tariff. And eventually, like all of this can contribute to the achievement of outcomes. But those outcomes are not necessarily goals by themselves, can be considered as enablers of some of the other SDGs. And this is like one key reason that the evidence synthesis of SDG 17 will happen before some of the other evidence synthesis. From SDG 17, we can learn, we can generate lessons that can also be applicable to some of the other synthesis work as well. I want to come back based on all of this to also say a little bit more still about evidence synthesis and their values. Essentially, they provide greater confidence for like a number of reasons. It's because we can draw on a comprehensive overview of the literature, search in many different databases to look at all the available evidence from different contexts across all of these different topic areas. We include and exclude studies based on validated quality appraisal tools. And eventually we bring that together, both in statistical analysis or meta-analysis to pull the effects of different interventions, as well as narrative synthesis to generate lessons both about what works, but also why and under textual conditions. And you may wonder, like, this all sounds a little bit abstract. Just to give you an example, in a previous evidences, which we conducted of vocational and business training programs in low and middle income countries, what you generally see, if you look at the most rigorous studies, either control trials or quasi-experimental studies of those programs, those often don't show positive effects on women's income. You conclude from that, do those programs possibly not work? If you actually look at the evidence synthesis of the available evidence, you will notice that that's not actually true. The individual studies are often having limited sample sizes, which gives some statistical challenges associated with them. By conducting evidence synthesis, essentially by bringing studies together, you can increase the sample size. When we conducted this evidence synthesis, we actually found that vocational and business training programs have a positive effect on women's income, which you would not be able to find with individual studies. So the individual studies only provide a very incomplete picture of the available evidence. I already mentioned that we have to make some choices because of the ambitious line that we're facing. And one choice that we have made is that we are looking to do something that is somewhere in the middle of a systematic review, which usually take between 12 and 15 months, and a rapid evidence synthesis. So, like, systematic reviews apply systematic and transparent methods. We do that as part of rapid evidence synthesis, but we use some methodological shortcuts so that we can actually meet timelines. Systematic reviews include all research in the top. Rapid evidence synthesis sometimes only include existing systematic reviews. In this case, we will not only include existing systematic reviews, but there may be some subcomponents, part of our evidence synthesis, where we only look at existing systematic reviews. And ultimately, what we aim to achieve with this, with these choices is to generate timely information and lessons learned that can be taken on board to really accelerate progress on SDG 17. We're looking at 3 different components for this evidence synthesis. Despite the fact that we're choosing to not do a systematic review, it's still a very ambitious agenda. We're focusing, first of all, on a deviance assessment and an analysis of voluntary national review data. The question that we answer here is basically which SDG 17 targets are currently on track and which are lagging behind, and which countries are most successful in achieving the objectives of SDG 17. For those, and I was already mentioning, we're really looking forward to obtaining access to some of your data sets. We already have had some conversations with custodian agencies, and we're looking forward to having more of those. In addition to that, we're going to look outside some of the UN evidence. We're going to look at impact evaluations that look at the effectiveness of specific policies, programs, or interventions in achieving some of the SDG 17 components. So these are really about the most rigorous evidence on these specific policies and programs, but they ask a relatively narrow question on what works to achieve these objectives. So in addition to that, and aligned with the philosophy of the United Nations Evaluation Group, we're also looking at performance and process evaluation synthesis, for we have already and started searching, including also for the impact evaluation, on the types of studies that are available related to SDG 7. And for this synthesis, we're really asking the question, why are some programs more or less successful, and how do these programs achieve these objectives if they have SDG 17 objectives? Already mentioned, we have an ambitious agenda, and we have been doing quite a comprehensive search of the literature already. At this point, we have been doing various searches, both in all kinds of databases that are well known for having existing evidence on these things. And based on these topics, we have made a preliminary choice to primarily, I say primarily for a reason, focus on finance and technology. We see that for these topics, impact, performance, and process evaluations have most evidence available. But we also recognize the important capacity building and systemic issues for UN agencies in particular. So in addition to finance, trade, and technology, we would like to focus on capacity building and systemic issues in 2 different ways. One way is we ask the question within finance, trade, and technology, what is the role of capacity and systemic issues? And we have already found quite a number of studies that specifically look at this question. What is the role of capacity building in achieving some of the trade objectives? What is the role of systemic issues in achieving the trade objectives? And in addition to that, what we're looking for, and this is based on conversations with custodian agencies, we're looking to specifically focus on statistical capacity building, since there seem to be a lot of interests from custodian agencies on that pillar in particular. So thanks so much. This is just like a preliminary conversation. We only have so much time to discuss the methodology, but really looking forward to working with all of you. You can certainly contact me also at this email address at tdehop@air.org if you have any inputs to make or any reports to share or data to share. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, and Thomas and Ana Rosa, for the very informative presentations. Let us now open the floor for questions and reactions from our distinguished delegates, as well as from our participants online. Let's start with the room. Any questions or reactions? Yes, please. If you can please introduce yourself. Thank you.
I'm Grace Wood from the UK Mission. Thank you very much through this. I think it's really important as we come to the halfway point on the SDGs that we're talking about in a systematic way. Progress has been made, what has worked so far, and therefore what can inform countries to accelerate progress. A question I have is how this is linked up with UNDESA's work around the global report on the SDGs, which I think will be presented at the SDG Summit in September. I've just seen a draft go round. So just thinking about how we're linking those things together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there a few questions so that we can reply to them together? Yes, please.
Thank you, and good morning. John Gilroy from the Permanent Mission of Ireland. Thanks very much for the briefing today and the presentations. It'd be great if we could get copies of the presentations in. With Qatar, we had our first informal initial consultations yesterday. Something that's coming out strongly, and I'm sure will continue to do so, is the importance of data and evidence. And it would be great if we can harness the work of this coalition, as you mentioned, Anna, in the context of the summit in September. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other work the floor? Yes, Japan, please.
Thank you very much for today's briefing. We do really appreciate your very detailed explanation on the plan of this synthesis coalition. I have a small question about the steering committee that you explained, which composed of a high-level government officials and also officials and heads of the evaluation network. So, when do you think is a sort of timeline when you wish to see the establishment of this high-level, the steering committee? And also, are you going to request any sort of application to all the member states government and also the organization in civil society or academias?
Thank you very much. Let me start to respond in these three before we get to another group. On the UK request on the report being prepared by UNDESA, it's of a different nature, the report. That one has is commissioned to experts and is collecting primary evidence at this stage, and has done real consultations, and is a very important effort really commissioned by the Secretary General. What we are doing here is slightly different in terms of synthesis. We have explained the methodological approach to the synthesis, but also bringing in the evaluative evidence. As evaluators who are aware in your interactions with the different governing bodies of the UN, we are used to speak truth to power, right? Based on hard evidence of our studies. And therefore, we really think it's important for the evaluation community to come forward in synthesizing this evaluative evidence that, in our view, will have more explanatory power to identify that the factors that need to be accelerated for the ones that need to be corrected. So these are very valuable initiatives, but I would say complementary. Right? The comment on Ireland, we're really delighted to have your support, really very happy to know that you are also in that capacity of facilitator together with Qatar, and we appreciate your recognition about the timeliness of the exercise. We know that for doing this really will require time, and that's why we are proposing a 2-year timeline, right? So that we can work fully in 2023 and 2024 with solid evidence at the end of the process, still in a timely manner. And we hope that the first synthesis, to which Ireland has been very gracious, agreed to participate in the management team, will also serve as a proof of concept, because then we will see how it works, really, to have a global coalition, so many partners with so many evidence bases, right, that can really produce knowledge in a way that is useful for you, our member states. On the question from Japan on the steering committee, it is our intention to form the steering committee in the second quarter of 2023. So in the next 3 months, we should be able to solidify and confirm the steering committee. In terms of the timeline for application, yes, we're asking for voluntary participants, but we will have a very transparent process for identifying this the composition of the steering committee. The participation of academic experts and civil society representatives for us is more envisaged with technical advisory committee for each pillar, because we think there is where their input can be more valuable and related. Whereas we think the steering committee is more at the political level, because it is the political level that will be using the evidence, right? So we are really out to representatives of civil society. For example, within the evaluation field, ALNAP, which is a very important network of the humanitarian field, is a member of the coalition, right? As so is the Association of Voluntary Organizations for the Promotion of Evaluation at country level, called VOPES, organized around the IOCE. And so we are really extending our efforts to include them, but I think their participation will be more appropriate in the technical advisory committees of each pillar. Can I offer now the floor to our online participants, please?
There's one. There's a hand.
We have one. Yes, Norway, please.
Thank you, Oscar. I hope you can hear me. My name is Helge Stvetten. I'm representing NORAD, Norway. First of all, we'd like to say very clearly that we support this initiative. We think it's important. We think it comes at the right time. It certainly is ambitious, but we do think that it is possible with our joint forces combined together to achieve something which will be very important and useful for the post-2030 agenda. So our comment is on the governance structure, and in particular the steering committee. You might want to consider to also empower the committee to distill high-level messages, the most important recommendations coming out from the technical groups, in order to hopefully create a powerful message that is sort of taking the essence of this initiative to the member states of the UN and the larger multilateral society, to express what is important when it comes to the issues that have been scrutinized in this initiative. Because I will expect that there will be a lot of issues and a lot of recommendations, and to empower the steering committee with the authority to distill the most important issues will be a way to streamline the message and make a powerful message out of the initiative. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Helge. We really appreciate the support of Norway to the initiative, and your comments about the key messages very much well taken on board. May I offer the floor to Eva Fuman, and if you can please introduce yourself.
Yes, greetings from Finland, from the Prime Minister's office in Helsinki, Finland. And first of all, we'd like to thank very much for inviting Finland also to take part in this initiative. It's very timely, I think, and it was a good idea we are having this. So thank you very much for that. If I understood right, Japan already raised the issue that it should not, in a way, double the work that's done in the scientific global sustainable development report. So that's one point, but there were two issues. The first one was that could I ask from the American Institute for Research about this approach that for me it seemed fairly top-down approach, very much on the kind of institutional level partnerships, and I was wondering if more like partnerships informal and in the cultural transformation, are those picked up as well? And then my second question is about the outputs and the process. So I understand that the output is very much of these synthesis reports, which are very important, but is the process at the same time going to be a kind of capacity building process for all of us around the world to support the evaluations, because evaluations as such are not so straightforward, and especially when we are taking more systemic approaches as well, there's a lot to learn to all of us. But we are going to support very much the process. So thank you very much for this 1 hour event. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Eva, for the support of Finland. We'll reply to your questions briefly, but let me first give the floor to Daniel Jacobo please.
Hello, good evening, good morning. I will be brief. Just thank you very much for this official or a formal meeting that I think that it's steering this effort that UNDP has informed us since the last EvalNet meeting in June. So I would like to thank all the transparency and all this nature of co-creation. So from the side of Spain, we are ready to support in the Pillar 5, and we are happy to know more about the methodology. And I would like to subscribe to the words of my Finnish colleague. This will be also a very important opportunity to to know from this process and to enhance our capacity for the synthesis. So yeah, just looking forward to keep on working with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I pass the floor to Jin Kim from the GCF? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon to all of you. It's quite early here in Songdo, South Korea. So yeah, but thank you very much for this briefing. It's been really useful. I was wondering if you could comment on when the members of technical advisory panel and management group for each of the 5 pillars will be firmed up and announced. The Independent Evaluation Office of the Green Climate Fund, we do hope to get into the planet pillar, especially. So yeah, I was wondering if you would comment on that timeline. And also, yes, for this synthesis coalition work, I think the timeline is very ambitious. We hope to, get this done in 2 years' time and everything. But are we confident that the uptake of the recommendations can be really done in the next 5 years, before the SDG kind of, campaign finishes? And if you could comment on whether these recommendations will be targeting mostly the member states that are supporting this coalition work, or if it's for all UN member states, and whether you would have like short-term, mid-term, long-term recommendations as well. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much to our online participants. Let's start with the round of responses. Thomas, pass to you to respond to the first part of the questions from Finland, please.
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. So I think the question, I was not 100% sure whether I could hear it all very well, but I believe the question was about whether the evidence synthesis would also include a focus on cultural transformation and informal processes. I think here we probably need to distinguish between 2 different elements of the evidence synthesis, or 3 actually. When we analyze the SDG 17 data as part of the deviance assessment, those will probably focus less on informal processes and cultural transformation. The same holds for the impact evaluation. I think where we really can focus on the cultural transformation and like more informal processes related to SDG 17 is really in the performance and process evaluation piece. When we think about it, it's really about ensuring that we don't really generate lessons and assume that those are not contextually specific, but also make sure that we actually take into consideration how cultural processes can actually like influence where lessons may apply, where lessons may not apply. Cultural transformation is one of those. I think we want more than just that contextual characteristic. There are probably many more to those. It's certainly an excellent question and certainly something we can take into consideration.
Thank you very much. Ana Rosa, please.
Thank you, Oscar, and thank you, Thomas, and thank you to the distinguished delegates. Add a little more on the Finland side, on the capacity building, on the opportunity to learn, on the capacity to promote the uptake of these recommendations. We really hope to produce much more than 5 reports. We're much more ambitious than just delivering 5 reports on FCG pillars. We're really building the capacity of UN agencies and partners with a platform, an evaluative evidence platform that will allow us to do much more than just these 5 syntheses. But these 5 syntheses are timely. We need to do them now, and we really need to make them available as soon as possible so member states have enough time to act upon the recommendations. So yes, we welcome all of you, partners, UN partners, but member states, to be part of this committee, to guide us on steering the exercise, but also take part in the management group if you wish, where there will be some methodological discussion, and then really help us identify key subject matter experts that will guide us on the content of each of these pillars. As you saw from SDG 5, that seems simple. It's only one goal, partnership. Within that one goal, there's very complex topics, and the systemic issues are a multitude of issues. They're very complex there. So there's a lot of opportunities to learn. Welcome you to join all the different parts of the governance structure so we can learn together and really promote something focused, utility focused for member states to use. In response to our colleague from GCF, thank you very much on about the dates and when are we going to get together. The GCF has graciously accepted to be one of the co-lead partners, the planet pillar. So we will very quickly be putting together a meeting of the management group where we will be discussing details. So the planet and the people pillars are more advanced in terms of co-leads coming or identification of potential co-leads. So this should be happening very soon. We will call a meeting very soon. And we will try to quickly push for the other two pillars as well, because we have to deliver all of them by July 2024. And we hope to work together gathering data for this. And I take this opportunity to invite you all for a meeting this afternoon at UNICEF Halls. Who's greatly invited us to have a subsequent meeting there of the partners. So all UN and non-UN partners are welcome this afternoon at Schlock, where we're going to discuss these details of how we're going to go about identifying the co-leads, how we're going to go about raising to ensure we can even get started with the other four in very quickly. And so we'll discuss the details of the coalition. And then tomorrow at 9 a.m. at UNDP Independent Evaluation Office, we will have the first meeting of the management. So you're welcome to also take part in this group, even if you're not interested in being part of the management group for this pillar in particular, but it's interesting for you to get a sense of how this will function. Thomas is going to go in a bit more in depth in the methodology and the scoping proposal that we're offering. And there we're going to be able to discuss a little bit more and the ways forward. And that will be replicated for the next pillars. But we hope the end of the month to have at least called interested parties to start talking on how we're going to together approach resource mobilization and identifying partners and the advisory panel. The advisory panel, we're more in a rush for the partnership bill needed immediately. So we welcome your proposals as soon as possible. We hope by the end of the month, we have the advisory panel organized so it can guide Thomas and his team on moving on this. But we can continue to talk in the meeting in the afternoon. I know it'll be late for you, Eugene, but we can continue to talk. And everybody is welcome to also write to me or the secretariat email with any questions or suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ana Rosa. There was one last aspect of your question from the colleague from the GCF about the buy-in and uptake of these recommendations. That's why we are organizing the steering committee. We see the steering committee really as the users of the evaluative synthesis, right? We see the advisory panel as the ones that ensure the credibility of the exercise in terms of its academic rigor. And we see the management group, us, the ones who carry the piano before the performance, right? And get the piano ready for you to play music. And so, and plays music, our esteemed delegates from representing member states, right? Because we really want to provide you with this evaluative evidence to inform your decisions. That's the real aim of the exercise. I think we have one more participant online.
Secretariat to join the steering committee, management group, and technical panel. That was the only one.
As we have said, in the spirit of Coaltion, we are really asking for self-nominations, right? Therefore, there is no exclusion to participate in those. and are welcome. If Pakistan is to participate in the steering committee, by all means, right, are welcome. So I think that's what I can say at this stage. Right. Let's make of this a bit more interactive dialogue. I don't know if my colleagues from the other agencies would like to react or pose any additional question or comment. If not, let me give the floor back to you. All clear now. Sorry. Yes, please. I didn't see. Go ahead.
Sorry, if I could just chime in, I'm from the Canadian mission, so I will not, of course, echo the thanks from colleagues on bringing us together, and of course, Canada's buy-in in initiative. I wanted to, I think, just reiterate the point made by the colleague from Ireland. There is a huge moment for the political declaration, and the first report will be kind of happening once we might hopefully have concluded the negotiations of the political declaration, but how we can get attention to this initiative or political buy-in, which I think you referenced. These negotiations will take place, and they take place every 4 years in this. And so just food for thought as to how member states can also be helpful in either increasing visibility, but seeing what we can ask on the evidence. I was in that room as well, and it came up multiple times. And I believe a colleague mentioned we can't improve what we can't measure. So on the capacity building aspect is, I think, will be coming up very strongly in the negotiations for the political declaration. Two quick questions, if I could. One is to the question from the GCF, but in terms of implementation, I do, of course, understand the member states aspect of it and political buy-in in terms of UN implementation. And you mentioned this is at the request of the boards, at the request of the QCPR, but what kind of potentially accountability for entry teams and the RCs would be to implement some of these, what I hope will be efficiencies for achieving the SDGs? And how do we account? Sometimes the UN's work is like strategic plans have been created and run till I don't exactly know the years, but are not necessarily due for a review 2024. The same for country strategic plans that often run on a multi-year structure. So how do we ensure that there is at the UN country team and that implementation on the ground from the UN, and of course complemented by national governments across the world? And a second question, if I could, is how do we reflect, or how do you reflect on the interlinkages and the indivisible nature of the SDGs as one of the core aspects of the 2030 agenda, which is the framework of the SDGs? For instance, between planet and people, there's huge linkages. Where does climate smart agriculture fit in? Does it go under SDG 2 versus SDG 13 for this, as an example?
Thank you very much. All questions really, really appreciated. So indeed, the timeliness and the timeline of the exercise will need to be synchronized, right? And therefore, we really invite you, and we're very glad to have both Canada and Ireland in the management team so that you will accompany the process, be releasing preliminary findings as soon as we have them, right? So that they can be fed into your deliberations. On the capacity development, and which is also linked to the question from Finland, yes, we are all learning in this exercise. We are all learning, and we are very privileged to have a very well-respected academic institution who has the technical expertise in conducting this, who won the competitive process to be leading the first synthesis, from which we are benefiting tremendously in the exercise. So, as Ana Rosa mentioned, we hope that we're building an architecture here for sharing evaluative evidence that can be synthesized and presented responding to different needs along this implementation of the SDGs. On the accountability and particularly of UN country teams, that's a sensitive question, since the exercise per se is not geared towards accountability. We will not be producing rankings of countries, of where they are, and pointing fingers, right? We really want what works and to be accelerated and what doesn't work and try to correct approaches, right? And therefore, it's an exercise that is more oriented towards a collective learning. If there could be, after the exercise is being conducted, additional considerations on how can this add into the normative framework of the agencies and the accountability mechanisms, that is welcome, but it is not the first intention of the exercise. And it's important to have clarity about that, because SDGs are being implemented at national level by national governments together with effort of the collective international development community, right? And we want to learn about what is working in that domain. The interlinkages, this is a question that comes over and over, and you are absolutely right. The SDGs are interlinked and are a conceptual body in itself. We already see in the conduct of this first synthesis how the different components of SDG 17 are linked to other pillars, very clear. I think we would be able to do the exercise kind of in two subsequent learning loops. But first, we need to see what's working at the level of each pillar. And then we can ask the question, what is working systemically in the system of establishing SDG as a framework, right? And the validity of orienting progress towards a sustainable development future. And so I think the interlinkages will coming up very neatly as a result of the exercise. I'm confident about that. And we will be able to address these systemic issues. That's precisely what we want to do as evaluators. Instead of just assessing the efficiency of some structures that sometimes are not conducive to produce the results, we want to bring this evidence to the fore, to the center of the political debate to see what can be improved systemically thinking. But we will need to approach the exercise sequentially. Let's see first what is coming from each pillar, and then from the interaction of the pillars to continue learning. And we are as excited as you are to be in this journey to try to learn together. Would you like to complement something?
Thanks for that question. I think it's really interesting, actually, like to think about the ways in which the different SDGs interact with each other. We actually already see some of this also in some of our current scoping. Like, to give you an example, like at this point, we're already seeing studies that look at the trade liberalization of exports. Though that's a clear question that is like linked to SDG 17 only. But then in addition to that, there are studies that focus on the impact of trade liberalization on growth, on poverty reduction, on education expenditures, on health outcomes. And you can think of all these kinds of different things. And I think this is where SDG 17, the evidence synthesis, comes back as it's an enabler of some of the other SDGs. And I think in that respect, the lessons learned from this evidence synthesis can serve as an input for some of the future evidence synthesis, where if we see that there is a link between like certain policies at the SDG 17 level and exports, that some of the future evidence synthesis can actually look at the second research question. Okay, so exports have improved. What is the effect of exports then? All these like more final outcomes related to economic growth, health outcomes, education outcomes. And I think together, like ultimately, like it's also the ambition to have like an evidence portal. And I think this is where some of these interlinkages can come together, which I think would be extremely valuable.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Do we have more questions over there? All right. Online, we fine? Good. If this is the case, let me once again reiterate our big thanks for your participation in this first debriefing of the SDG Synthesis Coalition. We are delighted that you accompanied us in this meeting. You are very kindly invited to participate in the meeting this afternoon at 2 p.m. in UNICEF House, 45th Street, on the concrete arrangements for the partnership for the remaining pillars. and tomorrow at 9 a.m. in UNDP evaluation of 20th floor of DC1 for the management team of the partnership pillar meeting. With that, I wish you a great of your day, and we'll see you soon. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.